So I'm kind of, one of the key takeaways that I have from some of the conversations we've been having in this panel in particular is that you guys, as kind of the marketplace and the enabling platform, you're sort of like the diplomatic arm of the industry, right? I mean, not only are you the bridge between legacy television and bringing that into an automated buying construct, but just in general, ingestion of the data, making that actionable, legacy buying systems and planning systems, et cetera. I mean, how do you prioritize from what you deploy to market and from a product roadmap perspective? That's got to be a challenge for you.
Yeah, well, it's a decision of looking at how do you innovate and actually improve the whole process, but not ignoring how do you also automate existing processes, which is costing people a lot of money and a lot of time. And they have to be balanced. They have to go in parallel. You can't just bring great data and great decisioning, because once you've made that decision, you have to have somebody to hand it off to.
Right.
You have to hand it off to Envision, to Dave. You have to be able to integrate the data sources to be able to do that decisioning through automation in real time. So it's a balance. It's tough. And it doesn't have the same kind of availability of APIs like you see in digital, where everybody can just integrate because there's a lot of standards there. So I think the first thing is to innovate, is how to make better decisions, because TV does work really well. You can go in the upfront, you can buy really efficiently. So how do you improve that? How do you make that better? How do you make that smarter? And that is, I think, really having a really good understanding of the data to find audiences in places that are not intuitive. But also to understand from the sell side that inventory, so it's not a one-way, it's not blind, it's not the buy side has all the tools to better cherry pick your inventory. The sell side has to understand it too. So I think bringing all of that data into one place and making it easy to use, removing spreadsheets, removing multiple logins to different consoles. So I think that's the start to innovate. How do we improve the process? And then the other big challenge that you have to bring along with that is then lay all the pipes so everything can connect and go back and forth. But first is to innovate, make it better, and then participate with the rest of the industry to lay the infrastructure to be able to share that the decisioning back and forth.
And where do you think we are right now in sort of, if we just talk about linear television over programmatic, it is a very nascent stage in the market. Are we still at the place where, this is just about efficiencies, like to Fraser's point of dealing with the minutia of things like automation and just, what is a manual process and automating it? Or are we at the place where, do we just leapfrog that and we're myopically focused on eliminating waste and better targeting and addressability enabled through programmatic platforms? Like, where do you think the mind share is right now?
You have to do both. I think all this discussion around automating 50% of media buys, a lot of that does come through workflow automation. So there are those efficiencies, and it's to free up people to start thinking about, how do I integrate data? How do I use new technologies to be smarter about it? So they really are going in parallel. I think the adoption of proprietary data sources or the development at agencies is a differentiator for them. So that's a way to say, I'm not going to be squeezed just on really low buying margins, but now I'm adding more value. So I think that part of it, maybe more the DSP functionality, has probably accelerated faster. And there hasn't been a whole lot of push of who kind of pays for that other piece, that workflow automation. And that's you would assume that would be the first thing that's done, kind of to Fraser's point, like reconciliation is the first thing you train on. It just hasn't. I don't think people have been motivated as much. But now that you have all of these new tools to innovate and accelerate the way you buy, now you look back and say, well, I can't do that. I can't go as fast as I want without all of this plumbing being in place. So it's a challenge for agencies and for advertisers and for the technology companies on the other side of who pays for it. But I think there's a lot more collaboration happening now. People are coming to the table together knowing that this ecosystem needs to be developed in unison and with collaboration. It can't just be an agency pushing innovation and media companies not coming along. So some are way more progressive than others. Others are being more cautious, as I think some of the panelists have alluded to.
So I'm curious about the stakeholders, in particular on the agency side. I mean, if we talk about, is it a lot of time today is spent and consumed through what is the unsexy stuff, right? The reconciliation, things like that, just billing and invoicing and measurement. Is it the same talent, like literally the human capital that is doing that today, that is expected to then transition into this higher evolved role of media buying that uses data and is optimized and is business decisioning more than just media planning? I mean, Is that really the expectation of the industry? Because it feels like there almost has to be a displacement of talent in order to be able to get to where we're talking about.
Yeah, I think there was, in a panel earlier, there's a lot of discussion about how do you recruit the right talent for this? How do you recruit data scientists to understand it? How do you then cross-train media buyers who have done it in a very standard way for a very long time? There is, I think there's definitely a transition of talent, different people, and you see people who have been in trading desks or in the digital side of the business, they're starting to kind of cross-pollinate into TV. But television buyers, there is a science behind planning. It's just making that science more automated and providing them more tools. So I don't necessarily think it's one or the other. It's not a wholesale change of people or a wholesale change of process. It's a mix of both of those. And some people will be prepared and enabled to be able to thrive in that kind of new economy. Others won't, and they'll move on to other things. The interesting part is that it's more difficult now to recruit engineers because not only technology companies are recruiting them, the agencies are too.
Right.
So they can understand the technologies they're evaluating. So it's a slow transition, and this move towards putting people in leadership roles that understand it and then can hire the right organizations or reorganize and retrain is really important. And some of the holding companies have been more progressive than others, but you'll see it everywhere, that you start to think more about an investment lead across every single channel. And that's, it's a tough transition, but it's definitely happening. And a lot in the past 6 months that I've been involved in this, I've seen that happening in a really big way globally, and not just in the US.
And if you look ahead in the next 12 months, what are you excited the most about?
I'm excited about television making a real change, it not just being test budgets, it's not just being programmatic TV being bucketed as emerging media, that is becoming part of the practice. That the use of data, the use of tools to evaluate not just audience buys or programmatic buys that are a small percentage, but taking a step back and looking at the evaluation of every investment in television. How can I start to use those tools to direct how those are made? And that's what's most exciting for me. I think you'll start to see pieces of that emerge in the 14-15 upfront, but 15-16, I think it'll be part of the conversation. New fronts and upfronts, the data behind decisioning across both of those being at the forefront of the conversation and not just kind of in the background in testing. So I think that's the most exciting development over the next 12 months.